Hi, this part is going to be about the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party. In a lot of places in colonial America, they begin to boycott British goods in the wake of some of the Stamp Act, for instance, eventually the Tea Act in 1773. Um, so there is this resistance, and there's these anti-import resolutions or boycotts of British goods. And so 10 days before the actual Boston Massacre occurs, and this was in 1770, 10 days before that, there was this group that was picketing outside of the home of some shopkeeper. And this shopkeeper had basically not followed the anti-import resolution. So in other words, he was kind of dealing with the British directly. And so people were protesting outside of his home, and one of his neighbors came out and fired into the crowd and killed an 11-year-old boy. This 11-year-old boy, Christopher Sider, he didn't die immediately. Actually, Dr. Joseph Warren, one of the leaders in Boston, famous doctors there, tried to revive him, but he did pass away. So after this moment, people were kind of on edge, and there was a lot more anti-British thought. They didn't like the fact that the British troops were there. There also was, to the British, they were doing this thing called moonlighting. And what the British soldiers that were in Boston were taking, kind of extra side jobs. And this really angered a lot of the people that lived in that area, like they were taking their jobs, essentially, the British soldiers. So there was that resistance to that. And so at the customs house in Boston, mostly sailors were protesting, and they started throwing rocks and, snowballs at least, but some of them with, ice and rocks inside of them, which has the effect almost of a rock. So they're throwing at them, and in this melee that occurs, the British fire on them, and 5 people were killed. Now, of those 5, and perhaps the first one that was killed out of those 5 was Crispus Attucks, who was a mixed race person, African American and Native American. And so Crispus Attucks was one of these that were initially killed, and so the memory of Crispus Attucks is important in our American history. So ultimately 7 of the 9 were acquitted. Ironically, it was John Adams who defended the soldiers, who then John Adams would eventually become one of the early founding fathers.